it's Master Gardener Fred Hoffman, Farmer Fred, and today we tackle several topics, including the delayed winter pruning of fruit trees, and we answer a variety of garden questions about ant baits, winter garlic care, and tree roots versus raised bed. It's episode number 382, Delayed Winter Pruning of Fruit Trees and More. We're podcasting from Barking Dog Studios here in the beautiful Abutilon jungle in suburban purgatory. It's the Garden Basics with Farmer Fred podcast, brought to you today by Dave Wilson Nursery. Let's go.
Hi, Farmer Fred. This is Amy from Zone 8B in Northwest Florida. I have a question regarding ants in raised beds. I have an ant mound on top of where I have several rows of carrots planted. My carrots have sprouted, and I'm wondering, can I use the boric acid sugar mixture where those carrots and the ant mound is, and it not affect my carrot taste-wise or the yield? What do I do?
Amy, thanks for the question from Northwest Florida. And by the way, thanks for listening to the Garden Basics podcast. I appreciate it. Amy, you don't have to worry. That recipe for ant control containing boric acid and sugar, a recipe that Debbie Flower has talked about many times on this podcast, is not going to harm your carrots or your soil because the mixture will be in a container. But you do have to give it a few weeks to do its work because the ants will slowly be taking little nibbles of that boric acid sugar mix back to the ant colony, where it might take a couple of weeks before you cease to see ant activity. Here's how Debbie Flower described it in a previous episode. When you go out looking for aphids, you just might see ants crawling up and down the plant where you're finding aphids. What is that relationship between aphids and ants?
Yeah, ants collect that honeydew and eat it. They like that honeydew. Because they like it so much, they will actually protect the aphids from those beneficial insects like the lady beetle larva and the lacewing larva and the myriad of other beneficials that will eat the aphids themselves. And there are videos, there's probably YouTubes where you can look at, people have photographed the ants actually chasing off lady beetle adults who want to lay their eggs among the aphids and other beneficial adults so that they can take care of the aphids, protect them from the beneficials so they don't get eaten. They'll also move the aphids around. When the population of aphids gets crowded, the aphids themselves will produce a population that have wings so that they can go to a different place that isn't so crowded. But the ants will help that along. They'll move the non-winged aphids from place to place so that they have a bigger population from which they can collect the honeydew. So ants are basically farming the aphids and protecting the aphids from their enemies.
Nature's little ranchers.
Yes.
Those ants are harvesting that honeydew. So, okay, well, fine. We've attempted to control the aphids. Now we need to control the ants. What is the most effective way to control ants?
Ants are tricky. They're very well organized as a society, and they have lots of workers that are out there. And the best way to control the ants is to kill the queen in the colony. But that's tricky. She doesn't come out. She's the one who's laying all the eggs, and all her minions are taking care of those babies and bringing food into the colony and protecting the colony from anything that might hurt it. But she doesn't come out. And so we have to get to her by her workers. The ones who are out collecting food are the ones that are going to take food to the queen and feed her. And so we don't want to necessarily kill them where they are. We want them to take something back to the queen and kills her. Once that happens, the colony falls apart.
Yay! But I would think that just like in plant life and fertilizers, a little bit of something that kills ants goes a long way, whereas if you put too much of the bait out for them to take back, they recognize it as not good and will walk around it.
Either that or they will eat it themselves and die before they get back to their queen.
Ah, and you don't want that.
Right. The queen is constantly producing new babies, and so there's always somebody waiting to take that guy's job. Sounds like some bosses I've had.
So the control that we're hedging about is boric acid, but it goes by several names. On some ant bait control products, it might say orthoboric acid,
right,
or something with the word borate in it.
Borate, right? Yeah, yeah. There's several words, but look for that bore part.
Yeah. And it comes in many styles. There's a powder, a dust available. One popular brand that's pure boric acid is called Roach Proof. And there are of course, the little bait stations you can buy. They're usually sold in 4-packs or 6-packs. And you just put that along the ant trail and they will go in there. You know, the problem with those I have noticed in using them indoors to control Argentine ants is they tend to die right there. And you wonder how much actually makes it back to the nest. Whereas with boric acid, the powder, they just get it all over them and take it back to the queen.
I have not had the same problem with the prepackaged traps. I had a bunch of ants living in some of the plants in my greenhouse. And when I watered the plant, the ants came out and they just swarmed the top of the plant. And so I just put one of those little baits, and they do come in different. There are some specifically for outdoors and some specifically for indoors, and some where you can use in either indoors or outdoors. And I had one, it was like a tube of pre-mixed liquid ant bait. And I put it in the greenhouse and I put a broken piece of ceramic pot over the top so that it wouldn't get wet. And pretty soon, and I put one on the greenhouse bench, one outside the greenhouse where I saw the trail of ants coming in, and one in the pot itself. And the ants disappeared completely. So I used it in my bathroom as well. They seem to love the bathroom for some reason. I have a lot of plants in there.
Well, that's
that may be it. And it leaked all over the floor. So the type of trap may be of interest to you. They may work in different situations.
There are other ant bait stations, too, that are refillable. You would fill them with a liquid ant control product that has boric acid in it that's usually diluted with water. And these are reusable stations. They're kind of nice. You can stick them in the ground or place them outside. And once the liquid is gone, you can just refill it with the proper formulation. And you have to be patient with this. Unlike the sprays where you see immediately kill of ants, which, as we pointed out, could also kill the good guys, the liquid products we're talking about tend to work more slowly. And it might take a week or two, and this goes with the boric acid powder as well. It might take a week or two for you to control that invasion of ants.
Right, and you might be very surprised and perplexed that there are more ants around at first than when you put the bait out, and that's because they found this wonderful, easy source of something to eat. To them, it's sweet and tasty and wonderful food, and so they come and they call all their friends, and their friends come, and everybody's feeding like pigs at a trough around this ant bait. But just let it be, and as you say, it takes time. They have to take it back bit by bit to their queen, and then get enough. She's quite a bit bigger than they are, twice or maybe 3 times the size that they are. So it will take quite a bit to kill her, but she has to be fed it over a period of time. And that's where those weeks come in.
But you, being a gourmet cook and a gourmand, have a homemade concoction for ant control.
Right. Not something I would eat, although it is not toxic to me. So, and that's the wonderful thing about these boric acid baits, boric acid, borate, or orthoborate. Read the active ingredients list on the package. By law, it has to be there. If it has that in it, and only that, besides things like sugar and water, it is not toxic to humans or birds or bees or fish or your dog or cat. So it's not something to stress about in the quantity in those containers that they will not harm mammals.
Is it harmful to beneficial insects?
Not that I'm aware of.
Yeah, me neither. I'm not sure of that. It's sort of like the chemicals that are registered for use on aphids, like insecticidal soap or some sort of lightweight horticultural oils. They only harm the beneficials if they are hit directly by the soap or the oil.
Correct. But they'll only harm the aphids if they are hit directly by the soap or the oil as well.
Right.
Yeah.
There's no residual action on those.
Right. And the boric acid is the same. It has to be consumed. So it's presented in those baits in those traps in a way that is really set up for ants to find it and easily access it. So the size of the opening, the position of the opening, those sorts of things are created with the ants in mind. And other insects don't quite fit. When I spilled it in my bathroom, nobody else showed up. But it's my bathroom. I was happy about that.
Well, we've given people enough time to find pencil and paper to jot down the Debbie Flower recipe for controlling ants.
It's a really simple recipe. It is 9 parts of sugar and 1 part of boric acid.
So like 1 teaspoon and 9 or 10 teaspoons.
Right.
Okay, 1 teaspoon
and you mix
of boric
it together.
Acid. Yeah.
And don't put extra boric acid in it. Boric acid is that roach proof, sold as one brand is called roach proof.
Yeah.
There are others. They tend to be in
squeeze bottles.
Yeah, round squeeze bottles, because roaches tend to be in walls and small spaces where you have to put in the nozzle and squeeze in the boric acid. And professionals do use boric acid for roach control. If you're having a roach problem, you can ask your professional if that's what they're going to use, and it just dries them out. It just dries their bodies out, and they shrivel up and die. But we don't want, as we've said, we don't want the ant to shrivel up and die as soon as it eats it. We want the ant to take it back to the nest and feed it to the queen. So we're going for a very low concentration of boric acid in this mix.
And in this case, so far, we have 1 part boric acid, 9 or 10 parts sugar. And then when you mix it together, I guess you want to make a slurry with some water.
Right. So you make the slurry, and how thick that slurry is depends on how you're going to apply it. If it's on my kitchen counter, I'll put out a piece of wax paper or aluminum foil, and I'll make the slurry, thinner than toothpaste. I want it to stay on the piece of paper, but not dry out immediately. It does dry out fairly quickly.
Cottage cheese.
Have you put it in cottage cheese?
No, I'm just wondering if it has the consistency of cottage cheese.
Well, is it big curd cottage cheese or small curd?
Well, so it would be small curd cottage cheese. And it would be the creamy cottage cheese.
Creamy cottage cheese, yes. Something that will stay on the aluminum foil or wax paper. Put it in their pathway. At first, they spend time checking out the paper I've put it on, etc. And eventually somebody will start eating it, and then they'll all show up and feed on that. If I'm putting it outdoors, then I will put it in a container, maybe a yogurt container with something with a lid that can be put back on. So, and put cotton balls in that container, dig a little hole around the base of the plant so that the container will fit in the hole and the lid will be at soil surface. And then put little ant-sized holes in the lid and pour the slurry. In this case, I'd probably make it wetter, looser, so that it would be absorbed into the cotton balls. And the purpose of the cotton balls is that the ants have something to sit on while they're feeding.
Ah, okay.
And so you want the cotton balls to basically fill up the container, pour the now thinner, maybe even as thin as juice, slurry over the top, put the lid on, put it in the hole, and walk away. And the ants, you want the spoil right up against the container so the ants have a nice, easy way to get to the top of that container. And they will go in, or they might feed from the hole, depending on how close the cotton balls are to the top. And they will collect the bait from there, take it back, and come back and feed again. The lid helps it from drying out. It helps keep stuff you don't want, like leaves and mulch and soil, from getting into the bait, and gives the ants a way to get in and out.
All right.
And this bait will dry out, and so you have to replace it periodically. So I make a whole bunch of it, put it in a jar or some kind of container, keep it around. I check it periodically, add a little water if it's starting to dry out, and then check my baits and go bait stations and in the kitchen. I'll just throw out what I used one day and put some new out. Outdoors, you can empty the cotton balls and redo it, or you can just top it off.
So I'm looking at my ruler here to determine what size these holes should be for ants. And if I'm an ant in a social situation, I think a two-way street would be best for the ants going in and the ants coming out. So probably twice as wide as the body of an ant. And ballparking it, I would probably say, well, not a 1/4 inch, probably 1/8 of an inch. So for those of you that like exact measurements, use your 1/8 inch drill bit to make
to make the holes.
Or
you can pound it with nails, find a board, put the lid on the board and hammer a nail through and pull it out, pull it out to make the holes. Or a knife. A knife is a little harder because it leaves those sharp edges. It's hard to get the material out of the lid. You end up with just an opening, but the ant has to push its way through. So something like a nail or a drill bit would make the best holes in the top of the lid.
Or for real fun, a BB gun.
I suppose you could.
Yeah.
Target practice.
For those of you in the country. All right.
Get the kids outside. Yeah.
All right. Another reason for the lid, too, is, I guess, would be to keep dirt and pets out of it.
Absolutely. Right. Yes. Anything else out of it.
All right. And by the way, we'll have this link that includes Debbie's recipe also in today's show notes about how you can make your own boric acid bait trap. And again, it would be like in a tuna can or a cat food can outdoors with a lid and one of those plastic lids. So say goodbye to that plastic lid.
Right. Yes.
All right. That would work.
And those lids are for tuna cans and cat food cans are readily available at your local grocery store.
You want to control ants? There's a lot of good tips for you. Debbie Flower, thanks for all the great advice.
My pleasure. Thank you.
We're at the Fair Oaks Horticulture Center. It's a workday Saturday here in February, and we are talking to orchard specialist and master gardener Quentyn Young. Q, it's wintertime, but a lot of us preach the value of summer pruning of deciduous fruit trees, and there's a lot of good reasons for that. But people may be wandering around their fruit trees and saying, I don't like that branch there, it's too long, or that one's rubbing, or that one's crossing through the tree, cutting air circulation. Can I cut it now, or should I wait for warmer weather before I do that?
So what we usually recommend is you wait until probably March or April. We call it delayed winter pruning, and that's kind of our segue into what we call summer pruning. But we tend to advise people try to do as little pruning as possible.
All right. And I mean, obviously, if it's a hazard, if it's a broken branch or something like that, you could take that off.
Definitely sometimes you have to, but what I've been doing for most branches right now is marking them with tape to do a cut later.
Two trees in particular are very sensitive to pruning in the wintertime, and that would be apricots and cherries. Why is that?
Both of them are susceptible to eutypa and a lot of other bacterial infections. We have such a rainy winter, which is great, but it also brings its own host of problems. So you just want to delay pruning those guys either until spring, or if you're going to do it, let's say in the summer, no later than October.
All right. And the value of summer pruning is what?
Basically, if you come to the orchard, you'll see we keep all of our fruit trees basically in the 6 to 8 foot range. It's really easy to do that throughout the summer by regular pruning. It makes it easier to harvest. You can get more trees into a smaller space. They're just much easier to maintain that way.
And finally, a little recipe for you. If anybody at home has citrus trees, you know how they tend to all produce at once and they're all ready at once. What do you do with them? And on two of my citrus trees, it was a Moro blood orange and a gold nugget mandarin. They were both full and they both needed to get harvested. We made juice by combining the both. The Moro blood orange tends to be a little bit, I won't say sour, but it's tart.
Yeah, it's got a nice berry aftertaste. Yeah.
But you mix that with mandarin, it was like a 30% of the gold nugget mandarin and 70% of the blood orange. And it's fantastic.
Yeah, it's a great mix. In fact, when I was in Sicily, that's what they were doing. The fresh juice sellers were doing a blood orange, regular orange pomegranate combo. And it was a really good combination of flavors.
And it's pretty easy to preserve, too, because obviously you're not going to drink it all at once. And what we were doing is putting them in heavy-duty canning jars, 1-quart canning jars, and sticking those in the freezer.
Yeah, or even a lot of people fill up an ice cube tray, freeze them, pop up the ice cubes, put them in a bag, and put them in the freezer. Now you're good to go.
Like the old saying goes, if life hands you a lemon, make lemonade.
Make lemonade or make frozen lemonade and save it for later.
All right. Now, if only I had a pomegranate tree to try that recipe.
There you go.
Thanks, Q.
Thank you.
You have a small yard and you think you don't have the room for fruit trees? Well, maybe you better think again, because Dave Wilson Nursery wants to show you how to grow great tasting fruits like peaches, apples, pluots, and nut trees. Plus, they have potted fruits such as blueberries, blackberries, raspberries, boysenberries, figs, grapes, hops, kiwi, olives, and pomegranates. These are all plants that you can grow in small areas. You can even grow many of them in containers on patios as well. It's called backyard orchard culture, and you can get step-by-step information via the Dave Wilson YouTube videos. So where do you find those? Well, just go to davewilson.com, click on the Home Garden tab at the top of the page. Also in that Home Garden tab, you're going to find a link to their fruit and nut harvest chart. You can be picking delicious, healthy fruits from your own yard from May to December here in USDA Zone 9. And something else you're going to find in that Home Garden tab. You're going to find the closest nursery to you that carries Dave Wilson's quality fruit trees, and they're in nurseries from coast to coast. So start the backyard orchard of your dreams at davewilson.com. We get a question from Paul. He lives in southwestern Pennsylvania, USDA gardening zone number 6. And he says, I planted garlic on October 16th last fall. And as the Indian summer moved in, I couldn't keep the sprouts from popping up through. So in an effort to protect the sprouts and delay what ended up being the inevitable, I mulched heavily with shredded leaves and compost. Still, the sprouts persisted and came through. Then they were under many inches of snow for extended periods. My question is, with the state of the leaves now being green and wilted and laying flat on top of the mulch, what do you think I can expect in spring? Will the existing green sprouts of garlic die and then will new ones come up? Will it rob the bulb of energy forming a new leaf set? I thoroughly enjoy all the solid horticultural information I receive from your podcast and anxiously await your new episodes. Thank you for all your work. By the way, the garlic varieties I planted include Music, Chestnut Red, and Georgian Fire. Thank you. Hey, Paul, I think you're off to a great start, but keep covering those green shoots with more shredded leaves or straw or even a frost cloth to help prevent future damage from a late winter or early spring freeze. The varieties you're growing are all hardneck varieties, and those can take cold temperatures down to 30 below zero. I hope you don't have those kind of temperatures there. Peaceful Valley Farm Supply Company, a great catalog for organic gardeners, offers this advice about winter protection for your garlic. They, too, talk about the benefits of mulching. They say mulching is essential for winter protection when planting garlic, offering multiple benefits for the health and growth of your garlic crop. A thick layer of organic mulch, such as straw or shredded leaves, helps insulate the garden bed and protect the garlic cloves from severe cold temperatures. This layer maintains consistent soil temperature, it prevents the ground from freezing, and supports garlic plants in growing strong roots through the winter. Additionally, mulching with materials like straw or shredded leaves reduces moisture loss and can help suppress weeds, contributing to better bulb formation as well as larger garlic bulbs come harvest time. So proper mulching ensures your garlic is well protected, it promotes healthy growth, and you'll get a successful garlic crop in the spring. They go into more detail about the varieties of mulch you could use. They say for garlic, use organic mulch types like straw, shredded leaves, or wood chips. Those all can be highly effective. Straw mulch is popular because it offers excellent insulation against cold temperatures and helps maintain soil moisture. Shredded leaves also create a thick layer that shields garlic plants from frost and prevents the ground from freezing. Wood chips or chopped bark can be used in raised beds or traditional garlic beds to support root growth and enhance soil fertility. Choosing the right mulch, that helps your garlic cloves overwinter successfully, ensuring robust growth and a bountiful harvest in the spring. But they do point out that to effectively mulch for winter protection, it's important to follow proper mulching techniques to ensure your garlic thrives. Begin by applying that thick layer of mulch, and that layer will help to insulate the soil and protect garlic bulbs from freezing temperatures. For best results, spread the mulch after the ground has frozen, but before extreme winter temperatures set in. Make sure the mulch is distributed evenly around garlic plants to maintain consistent soil temperature and moisture, promoting healthy root growth and preparing your garlic cloves for a successful spring harvest. They also point out it's important to manage the watering needs of the garlic during winter dormancy. Garlic plants, whether hardneck garlic or softneck garlic, generally require minimal water as they're in a dormant state. But you must ensure that the soil remains well drained and does not become waterlogged, which can lead to root rot. While the ground freezes and cold winter temperatures prevail, it's important to avoid overwatering. Instead, check soil moisture occasionally to keep it slightly moist, but not soggy. Paul, once again, thank you for the question. Good question, and I hope you have a lot of success with your garlic this coming spring and summer. If you've got a garden question, just shoot me an email, fred@farmerfred.com, or you could go to our website, gardenbasics.net, and fill out the question there. And if you want to text us a question or leave a voicemail, give us a call, 916-292-8964, 916-292-8964. And by the way, thanks for listening to the Garden Basics Podcast. Jim writes in, and he's building some raised beds, and he says, I'm in the process of building 2 new 4x8 foot raised beds. The height of the raised beds will be about 2.5 feet tall. My concern is the adjacent redwood trees in my neighbor's property. Their roots would like nothing better than to get into my new raised beds. I know this because they've already gotten into my other raised beds. I have several solutions, I think, but would like your opinion on the one to use. One is to put down a layer of landscape fabric. Second is to put down a 4x8 sheet of 1/4-inch plastic. The third idea would be to use some 1/2-inch mesh wire hardware cloth. And the fourth idea is to use some metal flashing that is used for roofing. Well, at least you gave yourself a lot of options, Jim, on that one. He's been thinking about that. But we have a problem here, and that is the fact that you do want to stop the tree roots, but you also don't want to stop the flow of air and water at the base of the raised bed. You want to be able for that, especially the water, to percolate into the soil below. And then that way you won't have a permanent puddle of water at the bottom of the raised bed.
Right. You want the raised bed open at the bottom so that the plants in the raised bed don't die from too much water.
So how do you get around that? What do you do? And first, by the way, folks, for those of you listening back east and are thinking, redwood trees, I've seen those trees in California. They're big. Why would somebody have those in their backyard? And that's a very good question. I don't know why.
Yes, they're fast growers and they make great view blockers, but after a certain age or size, they take over. I had a friend and then they tend to throw second leaders. And those leaders get bigger and fatter with time. And a friend of mine had one break in a rainstorm and go right through his roof into the bedroom, out the window of the bedroom. It took 6 months to get that whole roof replaced and all the damage fixed. It's a number one rule is pick a plant that fits the size that you have to give it.
If I was mayor of suburbia, I would make a rule that no backyard tree could be larger than 35 feet. I probably wouldn't get reelected, but I would make that rule.
Yes, there are gated communities in this part of the world that make rules like that. And it's mostly for views so that you can get some shade, but your neighbor can see the lovely mountain views nearby. So there are places that would accept that advice, but other people would not.
Yes, exactly. And another thing, too, is for solar panels. And here in California, there's been a lot of legislation to make it easier to install solar panels. And one of those rules included your neighbor can't block your sun.
Right. And you don't want to block your sun yourself.
Exactly. Yeah. So think about that. Anyway, we got Jim with his hardware cloth, with plastic, with the sheet metal flashing used for roofing, or landscape fabric.
Or
wow.
Metal.
Yeah, the metal flashing for roofing. Yeah.
Number one thing to think about is that he cannot keep the roots out. Roots have an ability, they grow a certain depth below the surface of the soil. And that depth is determined by the amount of oxygen available in the soil. If you layer things on top of the soil, he's going to about 2.5 feet. Then the oxygen can't penetrate what used to be the surface. And so the roots will move up into the top of that bed. It'll take a while. It won't be tomorrow. But he is going to have a root problem with that plant. And he has it with his other beds. Number two is you can't stop them from growing in that area. If it were my bed, the first thing I do is dig down a little bit around where that 4x8 raised bed is going to be. And with loppers, with sharp tools, cut off any roots that are currently underneath the area where the raised bed will go. It will not harm the tree if you make nice, clean cuts. It will just, the tree will make roots in other places. It'll first rely on the roots it has, and then it will make roots in other places where it can grow.
And I think any person, any gardener who has dealt with trees in invading their garden know it isn't just redwood trees that are culprits. There are many, many tree varieties that have invasive root systems.
Yes, the tree that comes to mind for me is a fruiting mulberry. My last house had a terraced garden. And I went outside on the patio, went down 2 steps, and then I was on the lawn, and then I went down, and the vegetable garden was on the lawn level. And then I went down about 8 steps, and I was on the lower level, and then there was a level below that. The mulberry was on the after the 8 steps, that lower level, and my vegetable garden was the level above that. And eventually, when I went to dig in my vegetable garden, the mulberry roots were there. And I knew they were mulberry roots because they have a distinctive color. That's when the mulberry tree got taken out. So, yeah, trees can have problems in vegetable gardens.
How far was that vegetable garden from the trunk of the mulberry tree?
At least, I'd say 20 feet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, and tree roots go a long way. They go beyond the canopy of the tree.
Very far beyond the canopy of the tree. And they end up in places that have the things that they want, which is water and nutrients and oxygen. And of course, my vegetable garden had those things. And the lawn nearby had those things. I never dug up the lawn, so I don't know if the mulberry roots were under that as well. But they did get into the vegetable garden.
Jim also mentions in his email the fact that he's putting these raised beds on what is currently lawn. And that brings up another issue as far as, well, a lot of people will just build a raised bed on top of a lawn and think nothing of it. I tell you, if you're doing it on Bermuda grass, the Bermuda grass will find its way to the top.
Yes.
And I would definitely want to remove some of that turf, if not all of it.
Yes, I would maybe take a season out and solarize it. Solarization is a way of sterilizing the soil, so killing everything in it, but it has to be done with the heat of the summer. And so you would miss this season's growing of vegetables like tomatoes and peppers. You have to prep the soil, scrape the stuff off the top, the lawn, off the top and the weeds, prep the soil by turning it, water the soil, and then use very thin plastic and bury the edges and leave it for 6 to 8 weeks.
Clear plastic.
Clear plastic, yes, and very thin plastic. And the plastic I used was the drop cloth plastic you can buy in the paint department of a big box store. The thinnest stuff you can get.
I think it's 4 mil is the thinnest.
Oh, I thought, okay, you can even use dry cleaning plastic, but that would be a nightmare getting it all spread out and making sure you have no holes in it. You must bury the edges because you must trap the heat and from the sun that comes through the plastic and hits the soil. The light of the sun becomes heat and it heats up the soil and it'll go 3, 4, 5, 6, depends on your soil texture. That 5, 6, you'd have to have a very sandy soil, inches deep and kill everything in that area. And I did it for nutsedge, which can be a terrible weed. And it worked for the time that I lived on that property. Eventually, of course, everything moves back in, Bermuda grass being one of the worst. But you can try to get it out at least for a few years.
Exactly. Farmer Fred garden rule number 1, Bermuda grass is forever.
Yes, I think of you often as I work in my yard.
Now, however, I did that same thing. I did soil solarization one summer on an area that was Bermuda grass and converted it into a citrus orchard. And I was not bothered by Bermuda grass for the remaining 10 years we lived there.
Yeah, it's a very powerful way to get your soil ready. Solarized it would also kill the roots that are in that area, the roots of the trees nearby that are going to cause potential problems.
There are a lot of important steps, though, in soil solarization that we don't have time to go for in here. But in today's show notes, I will provide you some links on the complete step-by-step of effective soil solarization that can really do a great job of controlling existing grass and rhizomes, existing nematode issues, pest problems, seeds that you don't want of whatever. It's very effective, especially if the soil is moist before you cover it, and it can kill, I think, roots and seeds down about 8 to 12 inches as long as you keep it covered and allow that temperature to get up to 120, 140 degrees.
Yeah, it's a temperature process, yes.
And none of this answers Jim's questions, but the fact of the matter is, when you're building a raised bed, before you pound your first nail or put your first screw in those boards, think about the existing soil and what's already there. And let's go back to what we were talking about at the beginning. If you want air and water flow to go through that raised bed and not puddle at the bottom, you got to make sure that that soil level below has somehow been incorporated with the new soil that you're bringing in. And it doesn't have to be deep. It doesn't even have to be rototilled in. If you just take a spading fork, loosen up the existing soil, put down an inch or two of the new soil, that might be enough.
Yes, whatever you're putting on top. Many people use bagged media, or they get it in bulk from a soil supply place that has a lot of organic matter in it. And it's different, has way more organic matter in it, whether you're using bag soil or you're buying a mix from a supply place. It has much more organic matter in it than your field soil does, just by definition. It's just, unless you live in a delta, a river delta, the water travels the path of least resistance, and it will go down through your very nice, very organic soil that's in your raised bed. And when it reaches the field soil that is much more mineral, much less organic matter, it will stop. And it will build up until there's so much water in the bed that the next drop actually pushes the water out. And then you'll get water on the surface of the soil around the raised bed. A better solution, better for your plants too, because it provides a deeper root system and you don't go through this saturation period, is to take some of the new stuff, whatever that is, the bag material or the stuff you bought in bulk, and lay about a 2-inch layer on top. Use a tool. A spading fork is definitely a good one. Turn it into about 2 more inches. So you've got about a 4-inch transition zone that is a 50-50 mix of your new soil that you're going to put in your raised bed and your existing soil, which is your landscape. Then the water will not build up, stop at that layer and build up in your raised bed. It will drain deep into the soil below, and your roots will have the opportunity to grow down there from things like tomatoes.
So, Jim, in a nutshell, what we're trying to tell you is cut the roots out.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I would not use plastic under that raised bed because it's going to stop water, even if you put some holes in it. And eventually it breaks down. And then you've got all these plastic shreds in your soil, and it's a mess.
Yeah, landscape fabric isn't much better than plastic either. It can be very messy. And I would think, too, that even the pores in landscape fabric buried at that level would eventually clog.
Yes, and roots will grow right into it. They
love it.
They love it. They find it very accommodating. It does not keep weeds out. It actually helps them anchor into the landscape. So roots coming up from the bottom could do the same thing. So those two are out. I didn't even understand, the metal flashing one. All I pictured was metal going straight down the sides of the bed, which just deepens where the roots would go. Anyway.
Well, no, I think that can be a short-term solution, and the fact it would probably be good for 5 or 10 years. But that's what they would do to control, say, running bamboo, would be to put down big sheets of some sort of galvanized metal, maybe as deep as 36 inches, and surrounding the plant to keep it from doing that. So I guess you could do that as well, except I think where Jim lives, it's fairly rocky soil. So good luck with that.
Right. That's going to be a lot of work. And you want ideally 0 seams. That's not going to be possible, but you're going to have 1 seam somewhere at least. You might have more because roots will get into those seams and start to grow. So yes, if you went deep, it would keep the redwood tree roots from getting under the bed. So that is a possibility. And you could use that or just by itself, use the mesh of metal. Critters live in soil, moles live in soil, gophers live in soil, and they can come up underneath your bed and do damage from underneath. And so if you line the base of your wood 4x8 raised bed with mesh material, but it needs to be, the word escapes me.
No, it's pretty good heavy gauge 1/2-inch hardware cloth.
Right. Galvanized, right?
Right.
Yes. So it needs to be galvanized hardware cloth that you would probably staple to the inside of the wood and have it continuous come up the sides a ways so that these critters that live in the soil cannot get into the roots of your plants, and water and air can travel freely from your bed into the field soil.
That will do a good job stopping gophers and moles. If you want to stop rats, squirrels, skunks, raccoons, good luck.
Yeah, really.
So anyway, so basically, Jim, you're going to have to cut the tree roots or pay your neighbor to take that tree out.
Wow, good luck with that one.
Yeah, well, it's a thought. Good luck, Jim. All right. Once again, we have gone to the root of the matter. And with that pun, thank you, Debbie Flower, for your help on our little question and answer.
You're welcome, Fred.
Garden Basics with Farmer Fred comes out every Friday, and it's brought to you by Dave Wilson Nursery. Garden Basics is available wherever podcasts are handed out. For more information about the podcast, as well as an accurate transcript of the podcast, visit our website, gardenbasics.net. And thank you so much for listening and your support.